Hey guys, this is QXC. Today in this game I'm going to be talking about how to deal with early Phoenix harass in the Terran vs Protoss matchup. So this is me, QXC, spawning as the purple Terran in the north position on Lost Temple versus Liquid Tyler Noni, spawning as the green Protoss in the 9 o'clock position. Going to fast forward a little bit here. Some of the main things when you're dealing with early Phoenix play is you don't want to overreact on defensive structures. In a lot of ways that's kind of what the Protoss player wants you to do. You build a lot of turrets, you spend money on the engineering bay, the turrets, it slows down your tech, and it ends up putting you behind more so than if you had just defended against the Phoenixes with units. It's a little tougher to defend with units. You have to be really aware of where the Phoenixes are to prevent losing a whole bunch of SCVs and not letting various units get picked off. But in the long run it's definitely worth it. So I'm doing a pretty standard opening. Supply depot at 10 supply, barracks at 12 supply, gas at 13, and then I build the factory when I have 100 gas. I scout his main and I do see he is not getting a very early second gas. I saw him not get the early zealot. Build this bunker here. See, I use my marines to kind of fend off the stalker, make sure I don't take too much damage from that. Get my second gas and start building the reactors so that I can make a bunch of marines. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit more here. Taking my starport, I get the early Hellion so I can get a little map influence. I can kind of harass probes, and here we see the Stargate is going down. Harass probes, trying to build proxy pylons and just kind of see what's going on the map. So my Hellion does take the watchtower for a moment. Nothing too important going on up to this point. So main things when dealing with Phoenixes is one, you can go for cloaked Banshee play, but that generally relies on your opponent not seeing the Banshees or the cloak until it's about halfway done. The reason for that being the robotics facility takes 65 seconds to warp in. The cloak upgrade takes 110 seconds, and so the observer can be chrono boosted out in about 15. I always forget to set myself to busy. The observer can be chrono boosted out in about 15 or 20 seconds, and so if they scout your cloak, or rather your tech lab and Banshee, any earlier than about halfway, they're going to be able to get a robotics down in time and get an observer out. So I see his first Phoenix, and unfortunately I wasn't quick enough to cancel my Banshee. You're going to see the Banshee really doesn't do much at all. I don't want to spend on cloaking. You can see he starts his robotics facility almost immediately, seeing the early tech lab. And so this is where I really go into anti-Phoenix play. So one of the main components here is I bunker my main ramp. What I don't want to have happen is have my whole army sitting in my mineral line, and then he comes and all-ins my front door with a whole bunch of gateway units. And you can see he's planning on being aggressive with these gateway units. My build doesn't give me a whole bunch of military, and it's pretty tough to defend both your back door and your front at the same time. So right now I'm keeping a couple of marines in my back just to defend against possible Phoenixes, and I'm building an armory. This is the most key component of the anti-Phoenix play, is this early armory. This is what allows you to skip turrets and actually be aggressive against Phoenix play. When they go Phoenixes, they commit a lot of gas to the Phoenixes, coming in at 100 gas per, plus the Stargate, which is 150 gas. Yeah. And so with this, the effect this basically has on the Protoss's army and unit composition is they tend to not have as many of the tech units that they really need to deal with with Thors. And so the main counter to Thors are Immortals. Gateway units tend not to do very well. Phoenixes can't lift them up because they're massive, so Thors are immune to that. And Void Rays do fairly well against... so I shouldn't have built a Raven. You can see the Raven and the Banshee die pretty quickly. He loses 1 Phoenix, almost loses 2. So Immortal's pretty good against Thors. Void Rays are okay, but Void Rays are very gas intensive. So it's pretty tough for him to go Phoenix and get any significant number of Void Rays. Whoops. So here we can see I'm just kind of holding my main. I actually have half the resources in my army, but because I have a Thor out and these well-positioned Marines, there's really the Thor incredibly powerful against gateway units, and plus the fact that I can repair. You can see I lost almost nothing in that whole confrontation and ended up taking about 500 or 600 minerals off of his army. So we're getting really close to the critical moment timing window when they go mass Phoenix, or when they open Phoenixes like this. The issue, the thing that you're waiting for is the window between when you've got a couple of Thors and before they start really making Colossus. And the reason for that is once they've got a number of Colossus out, the Thors tend to decrease in power quite significantly, particularly once the range, well, really once the range upgrade is finished. And the reason for that, see I scout his main real quick to take a look to see if he's gotten the Colossus or Immortals out yet. So I'm going to pause for a moment. If the Colossus has range, let's say there's a Colossus here and a Thor right here, the Colossus can attack the Thor and take us a couple steps back and attack the Thor, and it can kind of kite the Thor and make it really hard for it to actually get in close to do a lot of damage. The other thing is, because Thors are so gas intensive, it's hard for the Terran user to have much besides Marine Marauder, with a particularly heavy emphasis on Marines, and Colossus do very well against that, against Marines. So it tends to kill most of the rest of your army. So this is, you can see here, this is why Thors are so good. Noni didn't do a whole lot of harass here, and I did build my base. I should have left more space here, but you can see the Thors do a ton of damage to these Phoenixes. Phoenixes with 180 health total, no armor. The Thor's doing 48 damage, so the Thor's effectively 3 or 4 shotting the Phoenixes, depending on if they've taken a little bit of damage or not. And because of their incredibly high range and the potential for splash damage, 1 or 2 Thors can really hold your main. You can see at this point I'm going to opt for some turrets. The reason for that is that you can see my money starting to get a little bit high. It's not really going to impact the army size that I'm going to be attacking with, and if I end up losing a bunch of SCVs while my army is out to attack, that would be really bad. So you can see here he's got 2 Colossus. Range is about halfway done, and he's got a number of Phoenixes. And so this, ideally my attack would have come a little bit earlier, but I really wanted to have a healthy number of Thors here. And definitely should have had combat shields, potentially +1 upgrades, but I can't afford to wait too much longer. The reason for that being, as I mentioned, once the Colossus start to hit a critical mass, this Thor counter becomes much less effective. So we're going to go ahead and watch the battle in normal speed. Here we can see the bio, stim, the Thors, and so the main thing I'm trying to do here is get the Thors to actually soak a lot of the damage. And the reason for that is, I'm going to pause for a moment. When 1 Marine dies, your damage output for your total army decreases by 1 Marine. When 1 Thor takes 200 damage, your army still has the same damage output. So ideally, you want to keep your bio alive for as long as possible, while keeping the Thors all alive as well, but soaking most of the damage. It's no good if you back your bio up and then they just focus fire down all your Thors right away and your bio's not doing a whole lot. You kind of want to spread the damage out, have the Thors take most of it, but also have the bio soak some of it, and keep as much damage dealing units out on the field and alive as you can. So here we can see basically all his gateway units are dead. The Thors made pretty quick work of them. The Phoenixes not really doing a whole lot. The Phoenixes are more to deal with Vikings than they are to deal with, I mean obviously they don't really do anything against Thors. You can see the Thors just kind of clean up the Phoenixes, don't really make it a big deal. I ended up coming out of the battle with 3 Thors alive, plus a bunch of SCVs going to be repairing. And at this point, Colossus, even especially without the range, just you can see they melt to the Thor's fire. And pretty much any gateway units he can produce at this point, not very good against the Thors. One thing to keep in mind, if your opponent starts massing Immortals, this becomes a little trickier. You definitely want to be getting heavier on the Marines and adding Ghosts into your army earlier. But the general theme here is when they go Phoenixes, they end up spending a lot of gas on those Phoenixes, and then before they have time to supplement their army with something that does counter Thors, you go for a big push with Thor bio. So we can kind of see how this game wraps up here. The SCVs keeping the Thors alive, Medivacs coming to support my army. You can see Noni is basically out of the game at this point, trying to make some Immortals and stuff, but it doesn't really matter. One really nice feature of the Thors is because they break force fields. You can see here I can just walk my Thor right up his ramp. I destroy the force field, and so if the Protoss player tries to delay you until he gets a critical number of Immortals or Colossus out to deal with your Thors, he can't really. You can just walk up his ramp and then take out his units. The SCVs keeping my Thors alive, and if he had gone Immortals earlier, I could have thrown in some Ghosts to help deal with that, plus my pretty strong Bio Ball. So that is how you want to deal with early Phoenix play. And the main tenets again: don't waste money on static defense, and that means turrets. It's okay to get a couple of bunkers, you're probably going to need them, but you can always salvage a bunker, you can't salvage a turret. Position your army in such a way so that you're covering your mineral line as well as your ramp. You don't want to be vulnerable to an all-in there. And then start working towards Thors. If you went for some heavy bio play, throw down a factory, get an armory, start making Thors, and go for a heavier emphasis on Marines. And then the next key component is you need to expand. Well, I'm not actually sure you need to expand. I would recommend it, but you could probably do some kind of one base Thor bio all-in to punish them for Phoenixes. But the main thing that you're going for is you want to hit them with the Thors before they have a chance to really transition into anything that counters Thors. So if they start making a bunch of Void Rays, you want to stop making Thors. If they start making Immortals, stop making Thors. But otherwise, if they get up to 4 or 5 Phoenixes, keep with the Thor count and then push before they get the counter to your counter. And that is that.